And with that, I think we'll get started. So great. I think welcome everyone to the Clean Mobility Options Voucher Pilot Programs Community Transportation Needs Assessment Closeout Celebration. That is quite a mouthful. Thank you everyone for joining us for this exciting event. Just to briefly introduce myself, my name is Sarah and I am part of the program administrator team, and I'll be the main MC for this event and will be helping to kind of facilitate the pieces of our various parts of our agenda. And just so we know who's in the room today, as I said earlier, I would like to invite everyone to, share your name, pronouns, organization, and your hometown in the chat, if you're comfortable with that, so we can kind of have a better sense of who else is in the room with us today. Next slide, Mary. Before we do get started, I did want to briefly go over some Zoom logistics. First of all, if you've noticed, this is a Zoom meeting and not a Zoom webinar. I think we're doing that hopefully so it could be a little bit more intimate and engaging interactions throughout the event. Because of that, we do encourage you to keep your video on so you can see your faces. But if you're not comfortable with that, feel free to leave it off, no worries. Secondly, we are recording this event and wanted to make sure that you all are aware of that. With that, we will be kind of at some point, I think, sharing some of this, sharing the recording at some point. And so for those of you who are unfamiliar with using Zoom, I'll give kind of a brief Zoom tutorial. I think the icon on the left, as you know, is the microphone icon where you can either mute or unmute yourself. We do recommend folks, keeping themselves on mute unless you have a question or we're doing the networking session at the end. Next to that, we do have the video icon where you can turn your video on or off. Again, we recommend keeping your video on. However, feel free to leave that off if that's what you prefer. The icon next to that, or with the two people, is the participant list if you want to see who else is joining us for the event. The chat icon next to that is where you can message either the whole group or privately message an individual. We definitely encourage you to use the chat to ask questions, share comments, or other things. If you're experiencing any technical issues with either your video, your microphone, or accessing certain Zoom functions, feel free to message Kevin Karner, who should hopefully be in the participant list, who can assist you with working through any of those technical issues. And then the icon with the two C's is for the live transcript, which you can view during the meeting to see an automatically generated closed captioning for what's being said during the event. And then when we have our networking session at the end of the event, the icon with the two boxes will help you enter the breakout rooms for more in-depth discussions. And then lastly, the icon at the very right is the face where you can use reactions or emojis, which we definitely encourage you to use during and after presentations of our various speakers. The next slide. And now we have our agenda, which we're starting off with just a brief welcome and some context to set the stage. Following that, we do have the presentations from our Community Transportation Needs Assessment awardees with a short intermission in between. And then we have some program lessons learned presented by the program administrator team, ending with some closing remarks. Following that, we do have an optional networking session where we encourage folks to stay to kind of have more continued conversations and connect with awardees, program staff, and other attendees in the audience. And with that, I'll be passing things off to Sam and Violet to do the official welcome for everyone.
Great, thank you, Sarah. Good morning, everyone. I'm on my cell phone. I don't always get great reception, so if it doesn't work, I'll turn my camera off. But first, I wanted to welcome everyone today. I don't know if everyone on this call knows what this is about or what we're doing, but this is one of a number of programs that the California Air Resources Board, along with our other sister agencies, implement incentive programs to try to increase access to clean transportation for low-income and disadvantaged communities. And this is one part of a number of projects that that we as a state try to help communities achieve. When we were first presented, so you'll get more information on what a clean transportation needs assessment project is when I pass it on to Violet, but I wanted to put this into a little bit of context. When we were first presented with the idea of doing a celebration for the wrapping up of 24 project or 24 needs assessments, it took me a little while to really understand and think about what we're celebrating. Because this is just one of many steps that many of our communities throughout the state will need to take in order to achieve the goals of accessing clean transportation and mobility options. So I thought about it and I thought, well, we've been through so much the last few years, the pandemic, social injustices that have happened. What better way to honor the work that the 24 communities have had than to celebrate and to have them present, to have a number of them present what they've learned, what they were able to accomplish with their communities, how everything went. This is a pilot program, so it's going to provide us with information on what went well and what didn't go well. So with that, I really think the word celebration is a great term for all the work that is accomplished. And another reason to celebrate is this program has been years in the making. Tens of thousands of hours have been dedicated to this project and the project as a whole, from the CMO team, which includes CalSTART, Shared Use Mobility Center, Local Government Commission. Grid Alternatives was our partner in the first couple of years, so I want to shout out to them. The Energy Commission, all of the stakeholders that have participated in creating this program and helping us develop and launch this program. So many of them from past grantees, community-based organizations, nonprofits, local governments, legislative staff, and the communities and the residents that have all spent their time educating us and telling us what and how we should design this program. So I want to celebrate all of the work there. It is a first step. And last but not least, I want to celebrate our CARB team, Ava Yaghubarad, who is the lead staff, and Violet Martin, who's the agency lead for needs assessments, along with our legal staff, our administrative staff. So many people have dedicated their time to support this. And so what I'm expecting out of this celebration is here's some really good things that are moving some of these communities on the next steps. And our hope is this is a long-term program. We're going to learn from these communities. We're going to launch another funding window next year. We're going to continue to provide capacity building and technical assistance as best we can. And so with that, I just want to thank everyone again who has been participating, who's been supporting this. And I'll pass it on to Violet, who will provide a little bit of background on this particular project.
Good morning, and thank you, Sam. I think I share in your enthusiasm as well. I'm Violet Martin, also with the California Air Resources Board, and we thought it'd be helpful to provide just a little bit of background related to why we're doing this important work. I think one aspect to also celebrate that along the lines of what Sam mentioned is that we have projects that we can share results on so quickly. And I think that's a pretty rare opportunity to, after a year, have some real results and really understand how our investments are working. So the Clean Mobility Options Voucher Pilot Program, or CMO, it resulted from CARB Senate Bill 350, which is the Low Income Barriers Report, and the recommendations, which include streamlining the grant incentive application process, promote inclusive and equitable access to CARB investments, and to also fund planning with deep and meaningful engagement. So we could better understand community transportation needs and ensure that when we make investment decisions, we're responding to the problems vulnerable community members need solved and providing benefits to those that are disproportionately burdened. This equity pilot is about changing outcomes, increasing access to opportunity and clean transportation and mobility options by providing under-resourced communities the means to conduct community transportation needs assessments, or CTNAs. Today's focus is on community transportation needs assessments, but it is one of 2 available voucher types under CMO. So I just wanted to mention that. When we launched CMO last year, we started advancing equitable community-based transportation planning in a very real and significant way. The goal is to not only understand transportation needs, but uplift the role communities play in identifying and addressing their particular transportation challenges, and ultimately develop solutions that work for them too. The program awarded vouchers worth up to $50,000 each to 24 nonprofits, local governments, transit agencies, and Native American tribes. And today we'll hear from 11 of those organizations representing 13 of those efforts. So I'm very excited to hear about these assessments, but first I'll pass it back to Sarah to share more details about all of CMO's first assessment awardees and our goals for today. Thank you.
Thanks, Violet. And we just want to share, I think, the full list of CTNA awardees. While not everyone, I think, is presenting their project, we do have many awardees still attending the event, and I think want to acknowledge kind of everyone's hard work and efforts. So listed here are the 22 awardees representing those 24 projects across California, with those bolded presenting some of their findings and outcomes today. Next slide. And then I think before we go into the presentations, we just want to provide some context for those who are unaware. The needs assessments were conducted between fall of 2020 and winter of 2021, where needs assessment awardees were doing data collection, project development, community outreach, engagement, and education. And with that, many awardees have finished their projects, or some of them will be wrapping them up soon. So we really wanted this event to celebrate their accomplishments, to kind of showcase some of their work and kind of acknowledge kind of the challenges and obstacles they had to overcome during these difficult 2 years. Next slide. And now onto the main attraction. The CTNA awardee presentations will consist of individual presentations by each awardee, and there'll be some time after each one for ask the questions or to share any praise, kind words or anything insightful you got from their project. Feel free to either add those to the chat or wait until the end of the presentation to unmute yourself and speak. And then next slide. And then here we have the order of presentations for CTNA awardees. So I think without further ado, I will pass things off to Chamberlain and Bill to start things off and share what they've been doing at Porterville Unified School District.
Oh, thank you, Sarah. Hope you can hear me okay.
Yes.
Oh, great. So, and first, thank Sarah, Fabian, Mateo, Anna, and the others at CMO that have really helped us on this great project. Just a little background. Porterville is in the Central Valley between Bakersfield and Fresno. It's about 40 miles west of the Sierra Nevada range and Sequoia National Park. Although there are high levels of poverty in the area and the community faces significant environmental stress, especially in relation to air quality and water scarcity, they have a really strong and innovative school community. And the school community has committed itself to reducing greenhouse gas emissions from its operations by 80% by 2030. A focus of our CMO needs assessment program is hiring and putting students to work from the community in developing that plan. So with that, I was going to ask you to advance the slide and turn it over to Jen Garvin, who will let you fill you in a little bit on how the work is going.
Hi, I'm Jen. So our main goals with our program is to make sure that all of our students have access to zero pollution and zero emissions transportation to and from school. And so there are a variety of different methodologies that we are hoping to accomplish this, part of which is the electrification of the school bus fleet. Part is expanding the Student Flex Pass program, which provides students discounted rates to the City of Porterville's transportation, which has a variety of electric options. We are also partnering with Safe Routes to Schools, which is a national nonprofit that is helping us to create active transportation plans to make it safer for students to walk and bike to school. And the students have been involved with this and our projects at every step of the way. If you can go to the next slide. We were hoping that we could have a number of students come and talk about the incredible work that they've been doing this past year, but obviously they're in school right now. So we had them record a message for you all that we are hoping that you can share.
Hello, my name is Sofia Fernandez and I am an intern for the Porterville Unified School District's Energy and Sustainability Program. By 2030, we hope to develop a Pathways to Clean Mobility plan for the school district, which will provide every student the ability to get to and from school safely, with zero pollution and zero greenhouse gas emissions. Our work includes purchasing more electric vehicles for the district, increasing students' use of the on-demand electric vehicle program, and making active transportation safer for all students.
Hello, my name is Shantae Jeans, and I am an intern with the Porterville Unified School District's Energy and Sustainability Program. I'm here today to talk to you about our methods. In order to better understand our community, we conducted a needs assessment on transportation at PUSD. Our assessment began with interviewing district principals, then releasing a broad community survey to parents, students, and teachers. In total, we received over 2,700 responses. After reviewing the results, we began conducting community engagement events for a more in-depth look at school transportation, in particular, walking and business issues. We also conducted walk audits to survey safety conditions of pedestrian infrastructure.
Hello, my name is Anayeli. We were fortunate enough to be granted an extension. Currently, we are working on analyzing the qualitative parts of our survey and summarizing our findings from our first community engagement event. We plan to hold more events with stakeholders with a specific focus on intersection upgrades and expansion of the Student Pass program that uses on-demand electric vehicles to better serve all students regardless of where they live.
Thank you, and now I'm going to turn it over to my coworker, Chamberlain.
Yeah, next slide, please. So hello, everyone. I'm Chamberlain. I work at CAPS 2. So this is just a small window into some of the data that the student interns collected, both from their community surveys and the walk audits. So the photo on the right is an example of one of the walk audits. The students created walk audit criteria under the guidance of Safe Routes Partnerships. And then they used this criteria to survey over 200 intersections between 4 different schools. So the purple is high school, orange is middle, and blue is elementary. They considered sidewalk and road safety and comfort at each intersection, and then they ranked them on a star scale of 1 being very unsafe to 5 being very safe. So this map only depicts the more unsafe intersections. So red is a 1, so the most unsafe, and then yellow is a 2, and green is a 2.5. Safe Routes is helping our students analyze this data so they can present it to the city of Porterville for future implementation. And our goal, again, is to give every student at PUSD access to zero pollution and emission transportation. And from this data, we know our solutions need to focus both on walking safety and reliable on-demand public transportation. So I'll ask you to advance to the next slide for Bill to wrap up.
All right, thanks Chamberlain and Jen. So basically our next steps, one of the key things we need to do is to develop an engineering strategy for the intersections that will have the highest impact, improving the intersections that we've identified that need safety improvements. We'll finish our report and are expecting to and hoping to apply for an implementation grant to support the clean transportation needs that we've identified in the plan. So you can learn more about Climate Action Pathways, the nonprofit that's supporting Porterville on this work.
1, 2, 3.
And then we also have a Twitter account. Maybe Jen can, I'm sorry, Instagram. Shows you what a master I am at social media, an Instagram account that posts the work that we're doing. So thank you all.
Great. Thanks, Bill, Jen, and Chamberlain. I think now we're at the point, if anyone has any questions, you can feel free to unmute yourself, or you can add them to the chat, or if you have any comments, I think, or other words, you can also feel free to add that as well.
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
That was really interesting. I'm curious about the safety walk audit, how you did that sort of, and sorry if you said this, Chamberlain, but what were sort of the criteria, like how did they rank them when you had the different color coding for most dangerous or, least dangerous? What was the criteria you used and how did they rank it so that it was sort of comparable?
Yeah, so when the students were developing the walk audit worksheets, they were doing this in partnership with Safe Routes. So they were given a variety of materials that how other municipalities had done it, how other school districts had done this, and there was a number of criteria that led up to the star rating. So the star rating looked at a number of different criteria of the intersections of sidewalks, of everything kind of in the intersection vicinity. And then the star rating was just an overall average of all of those different criteria.
Well, and that's provided by Safe Routes, that star rating?
No, so the students developed the whole process of how they...
Oh, the students created
but
it.
the different criteria of what they should be looking for was done with the support of Safe Routes.
Got it. That's so cool.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing.
You're welcome.
Great question, Jenny. Great. And I think with that, we'll move on to the next presenters, which we have Nancy and Amelia with Ecology Action and Regeneracion.
Okay, hello everybody. It's great to be here. I'm Nancy Falstick. I'm the director of Regeneracion.
And I'm Amelia Conlin. I'm a planner with Ecology Action.
Watsonville is a small city located in an area formerly known as Calendaruk in traditional Ohlone territory, which now has a majority Mexican heritage population. We are an agricultural community with fields located outside city limits. Unlike other cities in Santa Cruz County, there are few transportation options in Watsonville, aside from bus, car, and walking. Our main goal was to gauge interest in other options. Next slide, please.
And I'll talk a little bit about our methods. We changed our outreach strategy substantially due to COVID. We had initially planned on hosting in-person events to reach the community and gather survey responses. But because of Watsonville's restriction on in-person events, we shifted that strategy to door-to-door outreach. And that ended up being really successful for us. We had good success reaching the community, and folks were motivated by the gift cards that we were providing and were willing to take the time to talk to us and answer our survey questions. Before we had our team going door to door, we sent out a mailer to all the residents within our project area. And we also dropped off leave behind flyers, letting folks know the day and time when people would be coming to their doorstep. And both of those measures were meant to build awareness of the project and build trust with residents and let them know that there was a legitimate reason for people to be knocking on their doors. We also distributed the survey link online, but most of our responses did come through that door-to-door outreach. And some of our lessons learned from those methods were that we had less time than we would have in an in-person event to really talk through all of the different transportation options. We were asking people about a lot of transportation options that they were not familiar with and didn't have the same attention span and bandwidth to really thoroughly explain each of those options to folks. We also found that paper surveys worked the best for us. We started out with having our survey on iPads. That ended up being fairly clunky and had the best success with old-fashioned paper surveys. Next slide.
So a little about successes. More than half the people we surveyed spoke Spanish as their primary language, unlike respondents from most past Watsonville surveys. We found significant differences in responses when we sorted by language, so that's how we ran the data. We also collected data that was new to our region about the type of trips being taken by bicycle, which will be very valuable. And here's some highlights. 38% of Spanish speakers don't drive. That presents a key opportunity to provide other options. All transportation options were of interest to at least 19% of Spanish-speaking respondents, with shuttles and carpool services topping the list. Education needs to be part of any new option, and Spanish speakers showed less familiarity with different options than English speakers. Many transportation challenges were identified in this survey. Together, these challenges comprise significant barriers for use of anything except cars, walking, and the bus, and even those options present barriers to participation for some respondents. These barriers all disproportionately impact Spanish speakers. For example, 19% of Spanish speakers are not able to get around easily versus 9% of English speakers. Providing additional transportation options is critical to address transportation barriers in this community, as well as the negative health and environmental impacts of car dependency. Next slide.
So I'll talk finally about some of the big picture lessons learned and the next steps of our project. All of the data showed that folks are driving primarily within our project area because other options are not available or don't meet their needs. As Nancy said, we found that there's lots of opportunity to introduce new transportation options to give people alternatives to driving. Again, 38% of Spanish speakers within our project area did not drive. And we also found that 70% of respondents were commuting for their daily trips within the city of Watsonville. And that means those are short trips that can be more easily shifted to other means of transportation. And another major finding, again, as Nancy said, is that any new program needs to be accompanied by an education program that's tailored specifically to Watsonville residents. There's not a lot of familiarity with new shared mobility options within our project area, and so education is a critical component to any new program. We would love to have folks check out our summary report, which is posted on Regeneracion's website at regenerationpajarovalley.org. And we'll be using this data to support future grant applications for new transportation options. We're currently using the data to support a grant application for an active transportation plan for the city of Watsonville. So we're putting it to use right away, which is great. And one piece of feedback that we wanted to share about the project is that we had some challenges with grant administration. We ended up spending a lot of time working through budget adjustments as we shifted our outreach strategy due to COVID and due to the real costs of the project. So going forward, looking at future rounds of funding, our feedback would be to simplify the budgeting and invoicing process for future applicants. And that concludes our presentation, and thank you so much for the opportunity.
Great. Does anyone have any questions for Amelia and for Nancy? If not, I think feel free to add, any questions or comments in the chat when you have them. And then I think we can move on to our next presenter, which I believe is Lee.
Yeah.
Which we have.
I apologize. I do have a question.
Okay, go ahead, Jill.
Well, I don't know if it's a question, but would you mind with the group their administrative process, the problems encountered? Because, and I would encourage all grantees to do the same, because it was a similar experience for ourselves. Just initiating the grant process took a lot of time. So do you have those written down somewhere, I guess is my question.
We did share that feedback in the survey when we submitted our summary report, so did document some of those comments. Was that your question, Jill?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, great. With that, I think we'll move on to Leap.
Hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Aldo Garcia, and I'm very happy to be here this morning and hear about all the other amazing transportation needs assessments that are taking place all over. Again, I'm really happy to be representing the LEAP Institute. So LEAP was awarded 3 project areas, so one in Mecca, the other in the community of Pajaro, and then another in the community of Kettleman City. So today I will be presenting on 2 of those. And first of all, we'll go ahead and get started with the one in Mecca. So the Mecca Community Transportation Needs Assessment, some background. Mecca is community located in Riverside County. It is a community that holds a large indigenous population of the Purépecha community, which is a region in the state of Michoacán over in Mexico. And it's also an area that just has been historically, impoverished. Again, very large Latinx community, low income. The mean income average is $25,000 per household. The majority are renting, while a small portion are actually homeowners. And then the average family size there is 4. So some of our project goals going into this is that Mecca definitely reminded us of the community that we're in right now, Huron. It is a small area surrounded by very large cities, Coachella being one of the closest ones. So we really wanted to identify the lack of infrastructure for transportation, for shared mobility options, and how we can essentially implement our own rideshare program. So just a quick background of some of the work that we do here at LEAP. We have a fleet of electric vehicles ready to be used free of charge for the community. We have volunteer drivers that we take folks to their medical appointments, social service appointments, and providing essential services for especially a very crucial time with COVID. And so our main goal was to see if we can, we'll talk about it in the next steps, but see if we can implement some rideshare programs like the ones we have here in Huron in the communities of Mecca and Pajaro as well. Next slide, please. So some of our partnerships, we went into these project areas with the intention to develop leadership, essentially. So there are some already local groups that have been doing great work and advocating in these communities. And so we just wanted to kind of strengthen those groups. One of the ones that we were able to connect with in Mecca was the Comité Purépecha. This was a sort of unorganized official group that we were able to connect, and we were able to come up with a name for them. And work together to complete this transportation needs assessment. So our methodology, we went in with the surveys, of course, and we took a canvassing approach. So if you look over on the right, we do have a map where we were there for a whole week. So we drove all the way to the Mecca community, and as you can see, day 1, day 2, day 3, and day 4 was split by the different regions in Mecca. If you take a look at the bottom right corner, you can see that the weather on that particular week or that particular day was of 104 degrees. And so that's definitely one of the challenges that we faced while we were out there. Again, located in Riverside County over in the desert. So definitely really, really hot. And again, that's one of the challenges that we faced mostly. The other one was the internet access. So we went in with like a tablets, iPads, and as we were doing the survey, what would happen a lot the first couple of days was that we could be in the middle of the survey, but because the internet was so inconsistent, sometimes we weren't able to, complete it, or it would like totally log off, and then we were just kind of stuck there for a second. And so we needed to rethink fast, which led us to do collect numbers and contacts, and we could give them a call afterwards and conduct the survey electronically for them. Next slide, please. So some of the findings and outcomes, again, we know that there is a huge demand for public transportation. Most folks spent very little on transportation, but mostly because they're unfamiliar with the different options that are available and the lack of options as well. So if you look on the right, basically you see a chart really, really red, meaning that they're not familiar with a lot of these different rideshare programs. So we have electric vehicles, for example, share ride companies, public transportation, things like Lyft and Uber. And, some of the folks there mentioned that some of these already established shared use programs, they just don't want to go to that community because it's kind of out from the main area, which is Coachella. So there's a huge emphasis on the large city. And again, you can see the disproportion between both communities that leads to a lack of funding for transportation infrastructure. It's a food desert. So it's constantly kind of battling between these two, one very large community and then the very small community of Mecca. So some of our impact metrics, age, the form of transportation that was utilized, and then the familiarity with transportation services and the frequency of their destinations was some of the things that we really paid attention to. One of the main successes that we had was, again, this was a very large indigenous population that speaks their indigenous language. So we were able to partner with one of our partners here in Porterville, who actually is one of the folks who actually still translates most of the language into the Purépecha language. And so he actually just recently published his own dictionary on this. And so he's definitely a nationally recognized person that is able to, translate these surveys into the indigenous language. So we came up with the whole survey. We're able to get it translated. And we actually had folks in the community who were Purépecha do the surveys in their actual native language. So that was something really cool. We were able to get a lot of responses using that connection. And it was definitely the way their faces would light up when they would see that it was written in their native language. It established that trust that we definitely needed when we were knocking on their door and trying to take a survey. And then I'll just read really quick one of the quotes that we got from one of the community members there. And it says, when people go to Coachella, they hit up family members or friends to see if they need anything from the supermarket. For example, a gallon of milk can cost $6 or $7, so they'd rather just get 2 gallons from a neighboring town instead. So as you can see, access to food, medical appointments, education were some of the main transportation needs in this community. Next slide. So some lessons learned. Again, you want to gain insight and connect with local groups. Some of these areas, they already have groups that just need a little bit of support from an already established nonprofit, and it helps build the trust in those communities. Another thing that we learned was just to remain persistent and don't lose hope. For every 50 people you ask, at least one will do the survey, right? So you just have to keep going and don't lose the hope. Again, we completed about 300 surveys in this community. And so it was really tough at first to get people to, do the survey. But as we went on and we got more folks to take it, it was definitely very, very uplifting. So the next steps for LEAP is just to, again, finalize the report. And we still want to host regular conversations in these communities to share some of the key findings with folks to see, after we did the survey, what's the purpose of the survey and what can we do to uplift the communities at the end of the day. Our call to action, so the LEAP Institute hopes to present similar findings with stakeholders in these communities. So we're really connected with some of the assembly folks there, Congress representatives and the elected officials to then host different separate meetings so that we can say, hey, these are the effects of the lack of transportation in the community. This is where folks need to go, and this is where the investment we see could help the community as best as possible. And then next slide. So now we're going to move over to the community of Pájaro. So on the left, I didn't mention it on the first presentation, but Pájaro, you can see there, we had a transportation needs assessment. We had a marketing firm where we were able to, send over the flyer with a QR code. So there was an online kind of strategy, but most of it was door to door as well. So there you can see some background. I know I'm running a little bit over of time, so we can just go over to the next slide. So some of our partnerships in Pájaro was the Our Lady of Assumption Church and the Office of Monterey Supervisor Luis Alejo. And again, the same methodology was used, surveys and canvassing. Some of the challenges that were faced was that Pájaro sits at the very edge of one of the county lines. And so there's always this constant kind of like whose responsibility is Pájaro. And so because of that, there was a lot of again, lack of infrastructure when it came to transportation. Next slide. So again, some of the findings and outcomes was that over 50% of the community stated difficulties with parking and mobility. The same impact metrics were used for this area. And one of the successes that we wanted to highlight was the targeted outreach. So again, we focused on the church there in that community. And it was a center, a social hub for a lot of folks that built a lot of trust. And so we were able to actually attend Mass with these people and then have an announcement at the end of each Mass. And it led us to conduct a lot of surveys after each Mass that day. And then next slide. Finally, lessons learned. So a well-developed survey makes the whole process much easier. Making sure that we take your time on planning the survey and making sure that each question is asked. Maybe there's one really good question instead of asking maybe 5 or 6, right? So finding those, going over the survey constantly was something that we really want to do in the future so that conducting the survey in these different communities makes the time is more efficient, and then we get some of the more clear insights as to what we're trying to do in this community. And then finally, our call to action, again, LEAP wants to present the similar findings to stakeholders, to elected officials in these communities, to basically highlight what's going on, and that there's a lack of funding on the infrastructure of transportation, and that hopefully we can implement a rideshare service like the one here in Huron in these communities.
I think thanks so much for sharing, Aldo. I think that's really amazing. I think we are, as you said, running a little bit late on time. If anyone has any questions for Aldo, I think please feel free to add it to the chat. And I think, Aldo, if you want to answer those there. And then we also have time, I think, end at the networking session for folks to kind of stay behind for more in-depth questions. But great job. And I think we'll be moving on to our next presenter with Yoots and Jenny presenting on what was found in Richmond, California.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm Jenny Mulholland-Beers. I want to start off by saying thank you so much to the incredible technical assistance that we received from Sarah, Fabian, Lauren, Mateo, Kevin, John Jackson, and Lena. You all were incredible rock stars and really went above and beyond to support us on this. I am representing Yoots, which is the Youth Outdoor Transportation Organization, and the Richmond Outdoors Coalition. Richmond is in the San Francisco East Bay, and we focused specifically on the historically underserved communities and low-income communities in Richmond. So you can see the neighborhoods listed there and highlighted on the map. There's a lot of economic disparity across Richmond, so we didn't want to look at the entire city. We really wanted to focus on the community members who are historically underrepresented in transportation planning. Next slide, please. These are the populations that we focused on. I won't read through all of them, but we particularly wanted to hear from youth, young adults and families with children, families with households with incomes under $30,000, female-headed households, and certain demographic populations that have greater representation in the communities we are serving, like African-American families and Latinx families. Next slide, please. So our goals was we were looking at transportation barriers and access, but particularly to outdoor spaces, and wanted to generate ideas for transportation improvements to increase access to nature. Our project partners are all groups that are working to expand equitable access to the outdoors in Richmond. So that includes Rich City Rides, the Watershed Project, and Yes Nature to Neighborhoods. And in addition to working with staff on each of those organizations, we also hired 12 youth and adult community leaders through those organizations. So people who are participants in the outdoor programming and live in the communities and could really help to represent the perspectives of the communities and also help to reach the targeted community members with our surveys and focus groups. Our grantee and program advisor is the Youth Transportation Organization. Our evaluation partner was UC Berkeley's Lawrence Hall of Science, and the project manager is Inclusion Outdoors, which is my group. Next slide, please. The methodology is similar to what you all did. Our challenges that we were facing was around distributing gift cards. That was really important to us, but we ran into a lot of challenges. I don't know if other people did as well, but we couldn't give cash out, which would have been the easiest option. Visa cards have really high fees associated. Venmo was not an option because of the technical access and challenges there. That many of the people who we wanted to give gift cards to didn't have Venmo. It was really important to us to find a local store that was rooted in the community, but also easy for partners to purchase gift cards and recipients to receive them. So in order to meet all of those components of a gift card, we ended up going with Target, which was a big box store, but is rooted in the community, and a lot of the community members work there and shop there. We had a big equity focus for our partnership. We had weekly team meetings, and we always started with a conversation about white supremacy culture and the antidotes and how we could apply those antidotes to our partnership. For example, one of the characteristics of white supremacy culture is really thinking about quantity instead of quality. So we flipped that by let's think about the quality of the surveys that we're gathering, making sure we're hearing from the right people rather than just getting hundreds of responses from people who might not be the right people. We also worked together and had long conversations and removed the "do you have a driver's license" from our survey, because some of our community leaders gave the feedback that a lot of people actually have to drive even when they don't have a driver's license, and that includes undocumented members of the community. And by asking that question, that would immediately make them, turn them off of the survey or not make them feel safe to answer it honestly. As I mentioned, we paid stipends to the youth and adult community leaders, and we provided gift cards. Next slide, please. And I'm just about out of time. So some quick findings from us is we found that 52% of our survey respondents do not consistently have reliable, affordable transportation for visiting state and national parks. So we came up with a number of different possible solutions. that are listed here. The one that really rose to the top was this first one, which is to provide outings led by community organizations in vans. So next slide, please. We found that 88% of adults and 72% of youth respondents agreed that if local organizations offered free transportation to participate in their outdoor programming at state parks and beaches, that their families would participate more frequently. So that is the solution that, after many surveys and focus group conversations, that we ultimately landed on. Next slide, please. We've had a number of lessons learned, just the importance of making sure that our solutions are low cost, low or no cost, that they're safe, they're time efficient. So a lot of things that other presenters have found. Also making sure that the solutions are accessible, that they're available to all community members, that they're usable by individuals with limited mobility, and they're well advertised. So our next steps is to work with our community partners to finalize the logistical components of our proposed solutions, apply for the Clean Mobility Options Voucher Program, and then to share the findings from this with the community. If anyone has any questions, you're welcome to check out our website, richmondcaoutdoors.com, or you can reach out to me at the email below. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks. Good job, Jenny. And I think if anyone has any questions, again, feel free to add that to the chat, or if you have any praise or kind words, you can definitely do that as well. But I think we'll be moving on to our next presenter, in which we have Kern and Suzanne presenting on what they did there.
Good morning. Thank you, Sarah. And ditto to what Jen just said in regards to the technical support we received from everybody with CalSTART. It was just phenomenal and continues beyond the submission of the summary report. So thank you. My name is Suzanne Campbell, and I am the Rideshare Coordinator and Regional Planner here at Kern Council of Governments. We're a metropolitan planning organization, so we work with the 11 incorporated cities in the county of Kern with planning and developing roads and sustainable communities. Now, Kern County is one of the fastest growing counties in California. We have a population of just over 917,000 people. The county covers the southern end of the Central Valley, the Sierras, and a portion of Antelope Valley, encompassing 8,200 square miles. So that means this county is twice the area of LA County with 1/10 of the population. Due to our geographic location, we have severe air pollution as a problem. The topography of this county traps the particulates during the winter months and increases the ozone during the hot summer months. Our rural outlying areas throughout Kern County require long travel distances, which include low development densities. Transit service in these areas can be infrequent and difficult to access. Kern County's disadvantaged communities also have some of the highest child poverty levels compared to other counties in the state. Many families are unable to afford one automobile, let alone two. This lack of transportation options leaves the residents in these communities without access to health care, groceries, childcare, or jobs. Our outlying areas also include the newly recognized federal Tohono tribe with lands in Mettler and the state-recognized Bala Talala tribe with several tribal allotment lands in the Lake Isabella area. Both tribes have suffered from a long history of underrepresentation. Our application for this project sought to learn the clean mobility needs of these two groups along with 13 other disadvantaged communities in the outlying areas of Kern County. Next slide, please. Our plan was to determine the interest in these communities to use alternative transportation options that are good for our air, such as conventional and electronic bicycles. In the rural areas where most of the residents tend to work in agriculture or the service industry, the cost of owning your own bicycle might not be an option. However, the cost of a service such as bike sharing is considerably lower than any of the other motorized options. At the time that Kern COG was looking at applying for the Clean Mobility Options Needed Assessment Voucher, we were at the beginning of a pandemic and didn't expect it to last as long as it has. Our original plans for in-person outreach had to be totally reevaluated as time went on, which I'm sure and sounds like all of the awardees have had to face. So we partnered with Providence Consulting on this project, and they conducted 5 different forms of engagement, which included creating and distributing 2 clean mobility options surveys. creating and monitoring a website for the 2 surveys, creating and monitoring 2 social media accounts, a newsletter, and attending an event where the team was able to distribute flyers and handouts. Through these engagements, the team offered participants a chance to win one of 20 $50 Visa gift cards by fully completing the survey. Providence created 2 online surveys with the website Alcor. One survey was 13 minutes long, the other was 20 minutes long. The surveys served to determine which, if any, Kern County areas were in need of clean mobility options and which clean mobility options were preferred. The surveys asked for zip codes, which helped determine which rural outlying areas in Kern County should receive the most focus. The shorter of the 2 surveys was linked in the website that Providence created for the CMO survey. It gave participants information about the CMO voucher pilot program and 2 quick links to take the CMO survey, while also giving them the option to enter their information for a staff member to contact them and answer any questions. The website also contained links to the social media accounts created by the team to promote the CMO voucher pilot program in the survey. Providence also created a Facebook and Instagram page for this project, and all of these platforms were set up in English and Spanish. Next slide, please. KernCog had a total of 465,682 impressions on the social media platforms. Now, impressions are the number of times content was displayed to the users. Providence worked on growth as well as promoting the CMO survey in the Facebook and Instagram bios. The Facebook page had a total of 3,328 engagements. In the social media world, engagements are defined as any communication between an audience member of your brand's social profile. This can include posts, like, tag posts, comments, reviews, shares, messages, and more. Although we were interested in learning about bike sharing for our outlying communities, the survey asked about other clean mobility options such as car sharing and electric vehicles. The responses were very interesting to see. Out of just under 500 surveys, 41% surveyed said that they would be interested in bike sharing, where 36% were interested in scooter share and 68% in electric cars. And those are just a few of the top responses that we received. Next slide. KernCog's pleased with the reach we were able to get during the pandemic, really put a damper on personal outreach. Now, what we would like to do is share these CMO survey results with each of the cities represented, and KernCog will assist those cities interested and able to apply for the appropriate funding to build a shared clean mobility option, such as bike share for their residents. In our outlying rural communities, this form of transportation is going to be an ideal first and last mile support for using transit in those areas. Thank you.
Okay, we may have lost Sarah for a moment. So I believe the next slide is our intermission. So if everybody would like to take a little 5-minute break, and we will return. We'll give you 6 minutes since it's 10:45, unless anyone has any burning questions for Suzanne. We can put them in the chat and come back at 11 Pacific.
Well, thanks. Good morning. My name is Jen Hernandez. I use she, her, they, them pronouns. I work with Community Environmental Council, and we're an environmental nonprofit based in Santa Barbara. And I'll be co-presenting with Joey Juhas-Lukomsky, who's the Executive Director of BikeVentura. They're our project lead, and they're a bicycle advocacy and education nonprofit based in Ventura. So we collaborated on a needs assessment project in Oxnard, which is a largely agricultural coastal plain community in Ventura County. And Oxnard is located on the unceded ancestral land of the Chumash people. And our project focused on learning about the mobility experiences and needs of the Hispanic, Indigenous, and houseless community. And Joey's going to talk a little bit about our survey and engagement strategy on the next slide.
Thank you. So we saw the survey that was given, the example survey that was given to us as a project resource, and we thought it was a lot at first. So we wanted to recognize folks' priorities during COVID especially, and also take into account that it had been maybe a long time since really meaningful outreach had been done in these communities, and we knew we needed to ask questions that were relative to folks' experience rather than just give them a big survey that required a lot of context and explanation. So we felt that we needed an incremental approach as well to establish a relationship and establish a presence in the community. So what we did was we started from a very basic level and started with a very short survey. So it was only 6 questions long, sort of took into account the time needed per interaction. We prioritized one-on-one interaction versus kind of a mass data collection. And we used the survey also to invite more engagement through the other opportunities that we created. And we also collected the surveys in 3 languages. We had Mixteco interpreters at a couple events and bilingual staff administering the survey as well. Next slide, please. So even with these 6 short questions, a lot of work with Lauren and working on Alchemer was really cool. And we got really informative questions out of short questions. So this one, what makes it hard to get to where you want to go? There's a space there at the bottom for other reason. And these short questions, I think, also left a lot of room for folks to share stories and sort of talk about the mobility barriers that they were experiencing beyond the ones that were listed in this sample question here. So next slide, please. And like I said at the end there, we created opportunities for more engagement, or we left a space where people could tell us how to get back in touch with them and sort of maintain contact throughout the rest of the needs assessment. Next slide.
So we did rely heavily on established partnerships and community relationships to be able to meet people where they were at. And we also tried to be really intentional about not being extractive, but always offering something in exchange for people's time and their knowledge and their stories. So we gave out bike lights for folks that took the survey. BikeVentura did a kids helmet giveaway and a bike raffle. A lot of our outreach was conducted at an outdoor food distribution. So we were able to reach, folks, a similar set of folks consistently over time there. But we also did outreach and interviews at pop-up free bike repair events. And also want to acknowledge Ana Rico from our team. She did a lot of this one-on-one engagement. She's on the call too. And next slide. So what we found from the survey was that most people were walking and biking, and some others were driving or taking the bus, but close to half of people found it difficult to get to work all the time, and distance and costs were the main factors that made it hard for people to get various places. But the one-on-one interviews and the conversations that we had while we were administering the surveys was where people really opened up and shared more deeply about their experiences. And so we heard a lot of stories and concerns about bike safety while on the road, COVID-19, over-policing, and underinvestment in basic services and infrastructure. So a lot of stories about people who didn't feel safe riding their bike on the road, would move onto a sidewalk, would be ticketed for riding on the sidewalk, and so on. We also learned that people were really unfamiliar with alternative and shared clean mobility modes. So we decided to host a clean mobility demonstration in person. We provided food, raffle prizes like transit passes and more bikes and helmets. So people could come and see and experience their various clean mobility options, including a school bus and electric cars and scooters and bikes. Next slide.
Yeah, here's some of the flyers for some of the events that we put on. So the free bike repair, the mobility option demonstration, and yeah, an online event that we did. Next slide, please. So the lessons we learned: engaging community members meaningfully takes time and resources. It's good to include incentives or reciprocity into each and every level of engagement. Building in a language access team from the beginning for us, I think, would have been really valuable, even incorporating them as a subcontractor from the start on the application, just so they're really involved from start to finish. And then we're going to continue to engage with the city of Oxnard. They're doing a sustainable transportation plan to make sure that the things that we heard in this are incorporated into that sustainable transportation plan. And from what we heard too, BikeVentura is going to be opening a community bike shop in the city of Oxnard next month as well. So thank you all very much. And thanks also, I want to echo all the gratitude for the technical support.
Great. Thanks, Joey and Jen. Great presentation. Trying to see if we have time. If anyone has questions, I think maybe we have time if anyone does have one where they want to unmute themselves, but if not, I think we can add them to the chat or any other comments or other kind of words. And then I think we're switching presenting screens. The next up, we do have Fresno County Rural Transit Agency with Chrissy and Moses presenting on that. I think we see your desktop, Mary. I don't know if you... Oops. Fabian, if you want to just go back to sharing your... Okay, perfect. Great. And then I'll pass this off to Chrissy and Moses.
Great. Thank you very much. Moses Stites, General Manager of Fresno County Rural Transit Agency. First and foremost, thank you for the opportunity to do a focused assessment here of this community, Biola, a disadvantaged community, one of 39 in Fresno County. And while this gave us the opportunity to do a deep dive in this community, aside from our big picture stuff that as a public transit agency we're already doing, we decided to hire our consultant on retainer who's with the agency to really do service to this community and to the outcome of the assessment. Oftentimes, if you want to do a specific study, you have to hire the experts. And it's if you have a loaf of bread, you take it to the baker, you don't go to the bank to have them bake your bread. So we decided to hire Walker Consulting. And with that, I'll turn it over to Chrissy Mancini-Nichols with Walker Consulting. Thank you.
Thanks, Moses. Next slide, please. So we performed our transportation needs assessment in the community of Biola. These are some of the project goals. We worked, so the community is about a 20-minute drive outside of the city of Fresno. They have a lack of transit options to get around. There are little to no sidewalk infrastructure, no real ability to bike or walk to where they want to go. And there's not a lot of resources in the city, like grocery store, there's a little market, but residents really need to own a vehicle to get to healthcare appointments or grocery stores. So we wanted to understand what we could do to help them with their transportation options. Next slide, please. So we worked through the project advisory committee, and specifically with the Biola Community Services District. They are a local community services district. They have a fantastic general manager that really supported us throughout the survey development, through sending flyers out, newsletters, working with the businesses and the residents. And that was a critical partner for us to get the word out and to host a community event. We started, like others, we started with an online survey. We only received, I think, less than 4 responses online. Biola, also, there's a lack of people that have access to smartphones or internet. So we felt that we had to go to the community and have an event, a pop-up event, and have food and prizes there so that people would be willing to come and give us their input on transportation. Next slide, please. So we held the pop-up event. Here's some photos on the event. We did hear some issues around the survey length. We translated the survey into 3 languages. And we, even at the pop-up event, that there were literacy issues, for example. So we really had to have one-on-one interaction with people to get their feedback, which the survey at times, some people really took 30 to 40 minutes to fill out, but we saw that they really wanted us to provide their input, but it was challenging because of some of the issues with translation and others. But at the event, we focused on the surveys, but we also just had a lot of dialogue between Moses and Janelle, the FCRTA staff, us and the community. They started to talk just about transportation in general, and people stayed for 1 or 2 hours. People just didn't come and fill out the survey and leave. They really stayed and talked to us about all of the issues. Next slide, please. So what we found was that a lot of people responded that it wasn't easy for them to get to where they needed to go. They really needed a vehicle to get around. Next slide. And they don't ride transit simply because it doesn't exist. There are no stops near them that they are easily walkable. And they would need to travel up to 20 minutes to get to the nearest location and then catch several transfers. So it's not really a reliable option. Next slide. We also found that most of the survey respondents did not own a bicycle because they said they didn't know how to ride a bicycle, which makes sense because there's not a lot of safe bike infrastructure in or around Biola. So we felt that classes or education on how to ride bikes could benefit residents. Next slide. Now, Biola is an area with higher unemployment and lower per capita income than the rest of the state. And we found that people were spending upwards, $200, $400 a month on monthly transportation costs. So that's a significant portion of their income that they're spending on transportation. Next slide. But there was a lot of interest in having a shuttle service and willingness to pay. We heard in a focus group we had that there was a question around, can we have a free shuttle service? That's one way to get people to take a shuttle or, ride the bus. But through our respondents, through the survey, we found that people were willing to pay per ride, $5 to $7, $10 for a round trip. Next slide. And an important finding is that there is a focus of where most people are traveling to. So Fresno, Kerman, and even within the city of Fresno, people are mostly responded that they travel to Northwest Fresno. So it was really helpful to hear that information so that we can start to plan for the next step in providing some sort of shuttle or microtransit option. Next slide. And as I mentioned, we had to translate into 3 languages, and then the lack of smartphones meant that we had to go out with the community and have community workshops. Respondents, they had heard of Lyft and Uber. Lyft and Uber, though, isn't a real option for them within Biola. There's because of the lack of drivers, it's not like they can just call a Lyft and it would be there in 10 or 20 minutes. But there was no familiarity with bike share or scooter share. And, that's obviously because 77% of the respondents had never, ridden a bike or didn't own a bike. So I think that showed us where we wanted to target next steps on implementation. Next slide. So what we were looking at is a microtransit rideshare program in partnership with either an NGO or some other operator. We're looking at the various cost scenarios and fares to charge, but this could be a real option to provide rides for Biola residents to those key destinations in Kerman and Fresno. Next slide. And we also are considering hosting a bike workshop to teach the fundamentals of riding a bike, safety essentials, working with the Community Services District and FCRTA, which are two known community institutions, to provide that information. Next slide.
Sorry to interrupt, Chrissy. Just want to let you know we're over time by almost 2 minutes now.
Okay, this is our last slide.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, yeah, so our next step is to apply for the CMO voucher for implementation.
Great. Well, I think thank you so much, Moses and Chrissy, on sharing on your project. Again, I think if anyone has any questions or comments or reactions, to share those in the chat. And I think next up we have Jill with Native American Environmental Protection Coalition.
Hey, I'm Choyahwa Jill Sherman Warren. Setian Nixon. I am coming to you live from the Hoopa Indian Reservation located in Northern California. Our project was a project that our organization, which is a nonprofit, the Native American Environmental Protection Coalition, responded to a call for assistance from the Manzanita Reservation, which is one of 19 tribal reservations that are located in San Diego County, which is the only county in the U.S. that is home to the largest number of reservations. Our project goal was to do a transportation access data analysis, engaging the community to determine their transportation needs. So this is a picture of where Manzanita is located. And when we think of San Diego County, we think of the urban environment. Next slide. Here, I want us to play a video because I felt like it was necessary to let people know what we're talking about in terms of the landscape of the reservation. So if you wouldn't mind playing the video. This is the main access road into the reservation. And what do we notice? Any white lines, any double yellow lines, any pedestrian pathways? Do we see street lamps? Do we even see, an indication that there's road markers? I can guarantee you that if you were to go out to the reservation, you would just get lost on one of these various dirt roads. And I'm speaking from experience, of course. Thank goodness I had cell phone service. Help me, I'm lost on a road. I don't know where I am. And the reason I felt this visual is important is in the red line is, of course, the boundary of the reservation. But I think, when people talk about tribes, they talk about them in such a general sense. And even state programs like this, and I know, I'm talking to the choir on this, that a lot of state programs create these grant programs without thought to really what they're, the community that they're serving. And oftentimes, Cal EnviroScreen is also a tool that is used by granting agencies to tell us, say, oh, we want to see how disadvantaged your community is. We want to, so we're going to use Cal EnviroScreen to determine how healthy the environment is, because really the Cal EnviroScreen looks at toxics, which works out great if you live in the middle of LA. But it doesn't work out great if you are living out in the rural areas of San Diego County. So our organization, we commonly refer to us as NAPAC, is a nonprofit that has 27 member tribes. So I work with 27 tribes within the state of California at any one time. And Manzanita really wanted to do this. One of the challenges that we faced, one of many, was, of course, COVID restrictions, access to the community, and then survey issues. The survey, we did use this survey, but we had to really work hard with our key informants on the reservation because they're like, this does not work for us. We don't have sidewalks. We don't have bicycles. Like, I mean, they might own bicycles, but that's just to drive around, you know, cruise around in the yard, so to speak. So next slide. I think we need to back out again. It's still the, okay. So some of our outcomes that we kind of already anticipated, but one that we didn't, was that there actually is a very high interest in electric vehicles in rural areas. But of course, charging options is a problem, and hopefully somebody from CARB is on this phone call, because I can tell you as a hybrid owner that somebody needs to be in control of charging stations and ensuring that they actually are functional. So there are no charging stations. 100% of the community never uses any alternative transit options because, well, geez, we just saw they don't exist. I'm sorry, I have to laugh because it's, for me, for someone who's traveled to most reservations within the state of California and the U.S., like, there just is a sad knowledge when it comes to tribal people and tribal issues. So our successes, what, you know, really was that all of the community adults participated, everyone shared an opinion, and I think, you know, the tribal community was open because we had tribal faces, you know, engaging them, and we had to, even for our informants, we had to do some education to them about what we're talking about when we're talking about clean alternative transportation. So we're still in the process of collating all the responses, and I look forward to a really interesting outcome. You know, like I said, one of the things I didn't anticipate was that anyone would actually be interested in electrical vehicles, but there is, and that's a huge positive. But again, we have to be transparent when we talk about those electric vehicles, because most often, if you're like me and you're using your heater, your air conditioner, your radio, all of these things are a drain on the battery. And I know that taking an electrical vehicle up to the Palomar Mountain, the people driving it were afraid that they weren't going to make it because the battery drained so quickly going uphill. So that's another issue that we will hear about, I'm sure, in the future. Thank you for your time. I'm honored to be here today.
Great, Jill. I think if anyone has any kind of comments or questions, feel free to add those to the chat box. And I think we'll be moving on to our next presenter, in which we have Angelina presenting on, I think, 2 projects, one with Sacramento Library and the other one with Community Resource Project.
Good morning. I'm going to start this off. My name's Kathy Crosswaite. I'm with the Sacramento Public Library, and I am very pleased to work alongside Angelina Rahimi on this project, and she has done all of the work, most of the work. The Sacramento Public Library serves the entire county of Sacramento. We have 28 locations and mobile services. Angelina and I met 2 years ago when we were in the midst of purchasing the first 2 all-electric bookmobiles. And that's how our partnership started. And this project just really solidified it. And we serve an urban, suburban, and rural communities, but this project is really focused on urban. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Angelina so she can walk you through the project. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. So the first project in Sacramento that I'm going to talk about is Sacramento Public Library project, which is in South Sacramento. And similar to other projects that we heard about, there are issues with access to public transit, and walking is not safe. And also we have problems with income and job opportunities and air quality. So these 2 census tracts that you see. Both of them are in the county of Sacramento, although they are attached to the city of Sacramento, and that by itself causes more issues with consistency and land use. One thing that we realized early on in our, actually during our application for CMO, that 70% of one of the census tracts and 52% of the other one, the households of these census tracts are single parents. So that was a high number, like 70% or 52%. So we were thinking that how we can reach out to those and see what kind of clean mobility option program can help them. Can you please go to the next slide? So we used several methodologies, and we layered the information. We used the mapping tool that CMO provided, which was very, very helpful. Thank you, Kevin and others. And we layered transportation assessment, and also we looked at our transportation assessment data analysis, and also we did a map-based survey. So instead of asking people where they need to go, we thought, wouldn't that be great if we could ask them to actually show it on the map, that where is their destination and where is their origin. And but we thought, okay, people may not have access to like smart devices. What if we reach out to students in high school students? And because it was during COVID, we actually reached out to them by going to their classrooms through Zoom. Of course, that was an issue to coordinate and have the trust from the city, but with the help of Sacramento Public Library, we were able to reach out to some schools and hired students to help us in the process to reach out to community members. And we trained them using Zoom meetings. We knew that they have access to computer that a school provided to them, so that wasn't an issue. We knew everyone has access to computer and internet. So we were able to train them, and we asked them to reach out to their own family members who live with them in the same building, or to ask questions and ask them about their routes and map it out on the online map that we provided. So we were able to add that to National Walkability Index and other surveys, online surveys, and create a map. At the end, I'm going to show you a link that has the result of all the information and also the mapping exercise that we did. After doing that, we realized that, okay, survey was great, and also we gave right to some students, and that was helpful as well. But we realized that some people do not have understanding of clean mobility options and electric vehicles and charging infrastructure. And we decided to develop a virtual reality app to be able to give them the option of actually, in a virtual environment, actually experience the car sharing and ride sharing. That was very, very helpful because even if they didn't want to put the headset on, their kids or students would put it on and go to the environment that we created, and we were able to project that on the screen so the family members could watch it and learn about those programs. So as you see, some of the findings from this project was that we realized that especially for single parents, the access to car sharing would be very, very helpful if they can find some alternatives for their kids. So we thought, wouldn't that be great if single parents can leave their kids at library to take advantage of library services while they're using this car share program to go to their destinations. Next slide, please. Some lesson learned. One, engaging students and the fact that they were able to the text. Okay, sorry. The fact that we were able to bring students in and they were able to translate to whatever language that their parents were speaking, which we were able to reach out to 12 different languages, was very helpful strategy. Building the relationship with the schools wasn't that easy, but after having access to students, that was very helpful to be able to use students as facilitators and also build the capacity for them to understand the community-based projects. And also, as I mentioned, virtual reality was a very effective way. We for sure want to continue the conversation. We already created an interactive map that we are updating it based on the new information we receive. And also we are going to apply for the implementation grant. This is the link that I know that you are going to have the slides. So if you go to the link, you can watch a video about our VR engagement, and also you can see our interactive map and our final report. Thank you. Kathy, is there anything that you want to add?
No, I think you covered it. It's, you know, very innovative for libraries to be involved in a project like this. We're very excited about it.
Great. And then Angelina, I don't know if you want to present on the next project as well, although I think we are running a little bit low on time, so if you maybe want to speed this one up.
Yes. This project is with a community resource project, which is a local nonprofit agency. The approach is very similar, our strategies to the other project, but I'm going to highlight on few things here for this project. One, we realized that the census tracts here have a percentile of 85 to 98 for unemployment, which basically means about 25% of adults in like one of the census tracts are unemployed, and about 20% in the other ones. So knowing that, we decided to target unemployed people or underemployed people and see how transportation can, access to transportation can help them with access to jobs. And we realized that about 20% of them, the main reason for their unemployment was not having access, not having transportation access. So we proposed a ride-sharing program. And again, we had the same challenge. People didn't know what we mean by ride-sharing program, how it's going to work. And if you go to the next slide, the virtual reality helped them to understand that, experience it. And again, since we use the students, we didn't need to translate information. I just want to add one more thing about translation. And sometimes we realize that some people, for example, people who speak Hmong, they cannot read or write in Hmong. They can speak, but translation, if you wanted to give that, like paper survey, wouldn't help anyways, because they wouldn't be able to read that. But using their own kids to translate was a very helpful methodology. I would like to, I know that we are short in time, so I would like to ask Luis, Executive Director of CRP, to add a few words. Thank you, Luis.
Yes, thank you, Angelina. And we're really excited about the results of this survey. My name is Luis Sanchez. I'm the Executive Director of Community Resource Project. And so we do a lot of weatherization work, and we also provide health and nutrition information, education throughout Sacramento County. We see that this is a great opportunity to leverage with other components of our strategy plan. We realize that unemployment is really high in these areas, and we want to create some workforce training around the electrification initiatives that are happening with the utility company, also the city of Sacramento moving in that direction, incorporating solar to provide lesser energy costs to low-income communities, but also to create opportunities where if you're utilizing electric vehicles, that we need charging stations in many of the areas. But these are also opportunities to create meaningful jobs for individuals, training them to learn how to install and or repair many of these systems. And so I think it's a good opportunity that this ride-sharing program can augment some of the other opportunities that could be created. So just wanted to share that. And thank you for the opportunity to present.
Great. Thanks, Luis. And then Angelina, I think you do have a question in the chat if you want to answer that there. But if anyone has any other questions or comments, feel free to enter that in the chat. And then we do have one more presentation, last but not least, Western Riverside Council of Government, in which I believe I'll be passing that on to Taylor.
All right. You can hear me all right?
Yes.
All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Taylor York. I'm the coordinator for the Western Riverside County Clean Cities Coalition. We do a lot of work, engagement and education and outreach, partnership building around deployment of alternative fuel vehicles, which in California is heavily electric, hydrogen, and a little bit of natural gas for the bigger fleets. So I'm going to talk about our community transportation needs assessment. We worked very closely with two partners. One was EviaShare. They are an electric car sharing organization that focuses on disadvantaged communities for deployment of their vehicles. And we had an intern with the Civic Spark program, which was great, huge help. She was an amazing asset to the project. For our project, we focused on census districts in 3 areas of Western Riverside County. That would be within the cities of Corona, Moreno Valley, and then all throughout the Hemet-San Jacinto Valley area. We used Cal Enviro Screen. We also, which I didn't put on here, but we used the California Healthy Places Index too, because it provides kind of a little bit different perspective and a little bit different information. To pick these communities, we realized there was limited, we couldn't look at the whole Western County, but we kind of picked communities that would be well positioned to gain from clean mobility and expanded mobility and had those challenges. And then, the main goals for our project were to really understand the current challenges in mobility, to importantly identify community partners. And we just sort of found this through the whole project, that community partners are very, very important. We had some challenges with direct community outreach, and I'll address those in a minute, but community partners really helped us address those challenges, and then to identify some potential solutions so that moving forward, we can really address these problems. Our coalition is housed in the Western Riverside Council of Governments, which is a regional joint powers authority that represents cities of Western Riverside County, the county, the school district, and whatnot. So we're really in a good position to take what we've learned today and bring it forward into solutions. Next slide. So I mentioned our partnerships. We also worked very closely with the city of Moreno Valley and Corona, and also with 20 plus community partners, which includes Think Together, Inland Empire Immigrant Youth Collective, Reach Out, TODEC, Inland Equity Partnership, education partners, just Mount San Jacinto College, Riverside County Transportation Commission, Kaiser Permanente. We really wanted to get a big, broad view of, because mobility impacts more than just getting around, it's health and air quality, which is why we're here with the clean transportation options. Our methodology for the project, we started our base with our transportation access data analysis, and we did use that as an important part of our report, but much of what we did was based on engagement with the community and with stakeholders. So we conducted direct stakeholder engagement through 3 workshops, community workshops. We implemented a virtual survey, which we also worked with partners to make available as a print survey. And we sent out a mailer, direct mailer, door-to-door with many different resources on it to all of the zip codes in the different communities to let them know what we had. All the materials that we sent out, presentations, were all translated into Spanish as well as English. We had interpretation on all of our workshops, and so we really wanted to make it accessible because Spanish is heavily spoken in these communities. Some of the challenges that we faced were drawing participation at community workshops. We really were challenged by COVID and by the kind of inability to do things in person. And so we had to rely heavily on virtual, and that was a bit of a challenge because either it wasn't like well advertised enough, maybe there weren't as access to virtual resources. And so what we did, and that also provided a challenge for conducting, it's hard to conduct virtual engagement with those who don't have access to technology. It's because they don't know about it and then they can't access it. We did make all of our workshops accessible by phone. We advertised that information. But what we did to kind of address that is we leaned really heavily on community partners and then partners who really understood the challenges and that their specific communities had faced and who were very active. And so I think we got some very valuable information from those folks that helped us better understand, even who we couldn't reach or who we were having challenges reaching. Next slide. So our findings, we found that people have to drive a long way. I mean, we're suburban Riverside County. A lot of jobs are across the county line in Orange or in LA, and that's a long way, and there's a lot of traffic. And for especially the Hemet San Jacinto Valley, public transit and accessibility are kind of challenging. The cost of car ownership is very high. They don't have any major freeways running through the valley area, and so getting out of the valley area is challenging. Public transit is not what it could be. So therefore, private vehicles seem to be the most common choice. You can see here, we made these cool like radar graphs that show a volume and direction of commuting. And so you can see that west has, and the distance that they have to go west is significant. And so we also heard that elderly, children, immigrant population, they face, exacerbated mobility barriers. There was also talk about being uncomfortable with using public transit or with Lyft and Uber and rideshare because undocumented residents didn't want to disclose addresses for Uber and Lyft, and they maybe didn't have a driver's license or didn't have a debit card, weren't comfortable with having those virtual apps and having their personal information out on those, and so that presented a challenge for them if they didn't own a personal vehicle. And then it's hot here in the summer, and so the infrastructure for walking and biking is not what it could be in many of our areas, and so that presents a challenge, especially for the elderly. And
Taylor, if you can, I think, speed things up a little bit. I think we're running a little bit low on time.
Okay, sure. I've got, okay, you can go to the next slide. This is my last slide. So lessons learned, community relationships are key. It's very important to educate folks on community options, understanding of different modes, how to access transit. Regional and flexible mobility options are key. Regional is a big thing because of the commute distance. And then options that are that reduce emissions are key as well because many parts of our county are still in federal air quality non-attainment zones, and so that's very important. Next steps for our project, we'll be working with our community partners to apply for the community voucher program. So thank you all.
Great. Thanks so much, Taylor. And I think thank you to everyone who presented. I think it was such great projects. And with that, yeah, if there's any questions or comments for Taylor, feel free to leave those in the comment. I think we also have Priscilla, the Civic Spark Fellow, who helped with that as well. And And then with that, we're moving, I think, into some program lessons learned in terms of what we as a program administrator team, I think, has also learned from you all as awardees, and I think through the past couple years helping to run this program. So I'll pass that off to Lauren and Mateo to kick that off.
All right, thank you, Sarah. So first off, wow, everyone, this has been amazing. You have all done and are continuing to do such amazing and incredible work. On a personal note, I've been honored to support, many of you in this work and have built many meaningful relationships. And so I'm just very pleased to see so many of you, hopefully, applying for those implementation grants, and that we'll have a chance to continue building those relationships. With that said, there have been some bumps and lumps along the way, and we have learned so much from all of you. We wanted to take a few minutes to acknowledge and share those lessons that we've learned over these past few months, and just acknowledge that we're learning and growing, and that this is a very new program, and that there have been hardships and challenges that all of you and your communities that you're working in have been experiencing and will continue to experience, and that we're trying to improve the program experience in the future. And then also just show our appreciation and gratitude for, again, all the work you've been making. And also fundamentally, big picture takeaway, we're going to get into a few little, more minute ones, but really that it's so important to center equity in our design and implementation. And so many of you have shown just dedication and have pushed us to continue to have a greater focus on equity. And it's always a helpful reminder for the team that we need to prioritize the community's needs, prioritize equity across all aspects of the program. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Mateo, who's going to talk more about a couple of our lessons learned. Mateo, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Close to the afternoon. I also share enthusiasm, like Lauren, of seeing everyone's faces. So I just want to say, hi to Moses and Joey and Janelle and Jill and Tobias and Chamberlain and others. It's great to see all of your smiles. And I promise I won't talk about budget modifications or payment reimbursement forms, but I will talk about how your feedback has impacted the future of the program. So if you just want to go, yeah, great. So listening to the communities has been CMO's #1 priority through the development and implementation of the program. I feel like we've definitely strived to support all the awardees throughout project timelines and really emphasize the importance of the feedback and input from day one. We have encouraged awardees to share with program team the challenges and successes of Window 1 needs assessment and how feedback has really been fundamental for improving the program, for current and the future windows. And, now we have a better understanding for the needs to shift timelines, extensions, provide additional one-on-one face-to-face conversation through Zoom. It's been great to see the effectiveness of that communication, and then create, that back and forth loop of follow-ups and check-ins to make sure that everyone is being supported. So, I do want to highlight how listening has truly developed strong relationships with the communities as well. So in the outreach conducted for the program, from one-on-one conversations to overall pre-application technical assistance to webinars, the importance of strengthening and growing the relationships with all of you became a clear priority. We've learned over the course of the program your community's history, your strengths, the struggles you've been dealt with, and with that, it has been invaluable information given, as an opportunity to shape the program now and into the future. So I just wanted to, on behalf of the CMO team, thank each and every awardee and applicant for sharing with us the challenges faced during a very challenging time. And we are so excited to see these assessments grow into projects and support residents within your communities. So I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I think that really the highlight is your feedback and how it's been integral to the growth of the program. So next slide, please. So over the course of CMO's community needs assessments, being adaptable and making adjustments and streamlining the program requirements was essential, as you could imagine. So throughout the process of program design and implementation, it was very necessary to lessen the burden to awardees and definitely to be more flexible with administration process and requirements. So now we have a better understanding of how different program design and implementation can be for everyone, and we want to thank you for your patience with us as we learn to be more adaptable and make significant adjustments to better meet your program needs. So one of a great example of listening to feedback and implementing it into real program change is the two-phase application and randomization process that maybe everyone is familiar with. This process will allow for more time for applications. It will, also reduce workload for potential acceptance and rejection of the application. We know that we still have more work set aside for us for, future planning and program development, and we are getting there. So thank you for reminding us ways we can keep the program simple. Your feedback has been invaluable, as I will repeat, in seeing the unnecessarily complex system and program that can be a barrier to, you all and to the applicants. Again, it's so nice to see many faces, and good luck, everyone. For that, I'll pass it over to Lauren.
Great, thanks, Mateo. Yeah, and echoing so many things that Mateo has already said, working and understanding the communities and the projects through, individual as TA was, really, really, I don't think we were expecting to, at first, to have, to really, get into the details so much. And it was just so amazing to start to work with everyone, to realize that it was so beneficial to learn about all of the projects and hear from all of you. And that, that really helped us understand what to offer. So, and be able to tailor specific, assistance to each and every one of you. And so thank you for letting us learn more about your projects. Again, we noticed early on that the one-on-one TA to be able to support the implementation was essential, as well as doing, more generalized trainings, but, we can't anticipate everything as much as we would like to. And that was sort of a big takeaway for us, is having to, be able to be flexible. And next slide flows into that, which of course is adopting a learning mindset, that there are many obstacles that are going to be in place in the future, that we all face so many, many challenges. And so we really want to acknowledge and thank all of you for sticking with us through what has been a challenging and difficult year, and working through so many other issues that the communities were facing, and that, taking everything that we've learned and making this program better. And I think that's really something that you all should be very proud of, that we're very proud of, is that, we are working together, and you're part of the team. You're part of this process that, to make it better for the next round. And again, hopefully many of you continue to be engaged in the process over the long term. So with that, I will turn it over for closing remarks.
And I don't know if I have a whole lot of closing remarks that are any different than what Lauren and Mateo just talked about. These have been wonderful presentations. The question of whether there's CARB staff on this meeting, there's a number of CARB staff, there's a number of Energy Commission staff, people from our outreach sections, people from our implementation sections of other projects. These presentations were fantastic. I did not realize they would be so informational with so few slides, and all of the work that all of you have done in your communities, persevering through the pandemic, working around our guidelines that we have created for this program, and giving us feedback on how we can adjust those guidelines to make it more simple, better for communities to be able to access these funds, be able to get technical assistance from the CMO administration team, and allowing us to be a part of that. One thing I know I miss is getting out to the communities. I've been sitting in my house for over a year and a half, and I can't wait till we get to the point where my staff and we can come out to your communities, see them, even though the map was great. as it zoomed over, the one road. There's still a great need for us as a state agency to really better understand what each of your individual community needs are. And so, again, we appreciate all of the work that you guys have put into this. We know you guys have a lot of work to do ahead. These were only planning grants. And so as we get closer to the implementation grants, we're going to be reaching out again, trying to understand what we can do. And we're also going to highlight the successes of what you guys have accomplished with these reports. There's other folks that we're going to share this with that we hope opens their eyes to all of the work that you guys have done and what potentially could lead out of doing these needs assessments. So again, I appreciate your time. There's breakout sessions after this, and you guys put a lot of effort into it. And again, I appreciate it. And the CARB team is looking forward to continue working with you guys to better our equity programs and